Hello, everybody. My name is Christina. I'm the producer of Siren Songs. I'm here with Valencio Jackson, one of our composers, and this is Meet the Artist. All right. So, Valencio, first things first, how did you get your start composing?
So just little ditties, for myself. I guess back in college, there were some parts that I needed to rewrite for some songs that someone else was working on. They asked me to join in and play with them, and I thought, well, that's not really playable for the flute or for the trombone, so I'm just going to rework that. And then I gave it back to them saying, "Hey, will this work?" And they said, "Oh, that's great." And those little projects like that, as well as writing little arrangements of hymns for my church choir, really sort of got me started along this composition path, although that was not the original intent.
Right, right.
um, music was not the original goal. Music was just something I did, and so the composition part of that really took hold, I guess, when I joined a choir at one point, and the director asked for some participation among the choir members and said, "Hey, let's do what we're doing a project. Would anybody be willing to jump on a team to help arrange these two texts for our group and make it something fun and interesting for a workshop that we were going to?" And that, I think, sort of set me on this composition path.
Yeah.
So that was, midway through undergrad somewhere. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I know that obviously like commissions, somebody approaching you motivates you to write a piece, but what in general will motivate you to take on a new project? What sort of attracts you to certain projects over others? How do you sort of choose your next pieces to do?
Well, a lot of that, well, I guess it depends.
Definitely.
I am drawn to that chamber art music space.
Mhm.
I love the conversations that happen with a small group. And I love having voices involved because then you can have real conversation. The instruments are giving you the impression of something, and the voice is giving you an impression of something else and giving you some text to go with that. And I sort of like that combination. So whenever I have an opportunity to put that together, whether someone's looking at some text or I hear some text in a concert,
Mhm.
um, whether it's actually being sung or whether it's programmatic, it's based on something. Sometimes that there's something that goes off, a little bulb that goes off in my head that says that would be interesting to set.
Yeah.
So that's what no, that's the on the how I choose my own projects kind of thing. In terms of doing other projects, I'm drawn to causes. I'm drawn to the environment.
Mhm.
Any projects that sort of involve me getting outside or doing something that sort of expresses a concern, an environmental concern, I'm on board with it pretty much, 100%. Yeah, I think that's it. And I am also drawn to a lot of church music,
Yeah.
and not necessarily writing um, purely sacred music. A lot of liturgical text I like to
Right.
set, or texts that are just spiritual that aren't necessarily drawn or of a particular religion. I'm especially drawn to those because those speak to me more strongly,
Mhm.
um, many times. Um, and so I'm drawn to those kinds of things. And I guess it's really to sum that up, it's about the conversations and about the conversations about our spirituality, about our place in this space, on this planet.
Yeah.
I think those kinds of projects really speak to me more
Mhm.
so than someone coming up with with an orchestral uh, project or commission or something large scale like that. Those are not necessarily more daunting, although they are.
Yeah.
They just don't speak to me as much as the chamber setting and text setting and uh, um, I don't know, an environmental or cause
Yeah.
related, driven project. So
Yeah, and I think that from what you were saying before, it kind of goes hand in hand with that sort of liturgical space as well,
mhm.
where there's sort of a message behind, the
Right.
text, and there's something in a larger context, like a
Hmm.
message that you can put in a larger context. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So how would you describe your work in your own words?
Oh my goodness.
Loaded
Um,
question.
a loaded question. Um, tonally driven, uh, can be rhythmically charged at times.
Yeah.
Um, I would say a lot of my work is programmatic in the sense that there is some narrative, whether it's text, whether there's explicit text laid out or not. There's usually, for me, there's a narrative happening,
Right.
or a sketch, a picture that I'm trying to pull out a narrative from. Describing a picture, describe the sketch, setting the atmosphere. I need more than that. I need to, well, how did we get here? Where do we go from here? What is it trying to say? What could it be saying?
Mhm.
What are our thoughts about this? How would you see this thing? Here's how I see it. Can I ask a question musically that allows you to think more about it? And so I think in that context, I tend to sometimes get into a theoretical space because of that, because I'm asking these questions and
Yeah.
creating these problems for me to solve. Um, but I fall back on a more on an aesthetic space that's more approachable, that really is more lyrical, that really is more tonal.
Mhm.
And that's just the space that I tend to inhabit. But it definitely is more of a style that sits on the line between popular music, between classical music, between different styles and genres, between jazz, between um, a rock
Mhm.
based style. So I try not to have my music be forced into one specific genre or style, but utilize more of what we have available. We've got a
Yeah.
toolbox, of stuff, of different styles and genres we can use. What would express this text or this thought or this story or this idea or this theme more poignantly? And
Mhm.
so my music comes from that space, whether it's narrative driven, mostly narrative driven, but definitely in a more tonal space, more rhythmically charged space. Um, yeah, that's what I would say about my music.
Yeah, I would say that rings pretty true. So, for context for our
Uh-huh.
audience, we're in the midst of going through drafts and everything, and Valencio has produced three great songs that are going to be premiered on Siren Songs. And I would say that that definitely rings true for those pieces where it's definitely very tonally charged, and it's really nice to see that as like a singer, because it's easy to sort of see, oh
Mhm.
yeah, like this is why like basically the I feel like in the piece everything has like a meaning, everything has is like
Mhm.
very carefully chosen, tonally speaking, rhythmically speaking, to evoke feelings and certain feelings
Mhm.
about our environment. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. So yeah.
Awesome. I'm glad my music speaks to that because that is how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. So, what's a recent project that you'd like to highlight, other than Siren Songs?
Other than Siren Science. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm working on a piece for wind bands, surprisingly. But here's where it becomes a more passionate thing for me. I'm basing this piece for wind band based on the folk elements or traditional folk elements of Quelbe, which is a traditional folk art music from the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
And so I took a lot of the rhythmic devices that we're using in that sort of have filtered into all the kinds of music that is present there, the popular music
Mhm.
mainly, and sort of looked for those elements and saw and thought of a way to incorporate them into a wind band setting. We used to have a ton of wind bands there, or wind band music was a really big deal 20th century, turn of the 20th century all the way through middle of the century, and then it sort of died away. And so the repertoire doesn't really have that
Mhm.
stuff. And then I go home for carnival and we get excited and we have all these other different ensembles and the modern day bands of whatever's happening. And I thought this would be a great way to sort of build that repertoire, that wind band repertoire back up, a great way to show off what is distinctly Virgin Island in terms of
Mhm.
our soundscape. Like what is that lilt? What is that thing that is distinctive about Virgin Island music? And it was a wonderful opportunity to do this as part of my dissertation project for my doctorate. So I'm jumping on board with that, and I think that's its own narrative in a way. It's passionate. It's something about the island, about the space, like how the music's used, how it interacts with the people, how they interact with it, and I try to take all of those thoughts about it and incorporate them into a new piece to sort of bridge that gap between traditional wind band composition, straightforward European American march or
Yeah.
whatever, to the folk music you get off the cruise ship, and you hear this island, quote unquote, island music, whatever that sounds
Right,
like. You go to
right.
Hawaii, you get off the boat, you hear this island music. Is it really that, or is it just a commercialized version of something that
Mhm.
tells you I'm on the islands and I'm trying not to go that far, but something that really says this is Virgin Island. This is important to our culture and has been important to our culture. This particular or these particular music elements, and can we put it in more this other concert classical space in a way that's sort of enhances both. And so that's my most recent project. It's a piece for wind bands, and I'm excited about it because it's wind band, large ensemble.
Yeah.
Woo! But
A
it's
little
an
bit more
opportunity to have a conversation.
complicated,
It
but
is a little bit
yeah.
a little more complicated, but it's an opportunity to have conversations with multiple instruments and that's how I'm using them as
Mhm.
part of the community. The family of instruments are parts of the community and how they interact with each other and what they want to say. How do they say it? How do they respond to it? And so for me, I'm creating this narrative that's kind of exciting and
Yeah.
interesting. I'm hoping that when it's all done, others will jump on the bandwagon or hopefully will love it too and be part of that storytelling after that.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, it sounds like a beautiful way to both pay tribute to that culture as well as, kind of reintroduce it to an
Mm-hmm.
audience that may not necessarily, get to hear that music or understand the importance or the context and everything. So it sounds amazing. It sounds awesome.
I'm hoping it comes off just as amazing as
Yeah.
it sounds in my head. So that's yeah, I'm excited about it.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So, talk to me about the premiere of Hush a few years ago. It was
Oh
one
my
of the,
goodness.
yes, it was one of those things that I remember when you first wrote into the project, and it was
Mm-hmm.
something that you were just like, oh, and this is this project. And it was like, wow, this is incredible. I have to meet this composer. So talk to me a little bit about that and how that came about and, the sort of history behind that.
That was a wonderful project as well. Hush was intended to be written for choir and orchestra, or chamber orchestra. It came out of not just a residency program at the Catholic University of America down in DC. And I was asked to write a piece for this group and for the occasion of the Christmas celebration in December. And so that was the theme, right? It was for this Christmas celebration. And I went to search for texts all over the place. Because first of all, I had that particular choir, a really good choir at my disposal, and a really good orchestra at my disposal. And I thought, oh my gosh, here's an opportunity to really show something wonderful. But oh my gosh, just a large ensemble. Oh my gosh, but how can I make this manageable? How can I make it approachable? How can I make it something that you can sit back in that audience and feel enveloped by something more? And so when I saw that text, Hush, it really spoke to me. Um, and so it became a conversation in my mind, more so than what the lyrics said, but how I crafted the music, more of just like you're talking to a baby, not necessarily a baby, maybe your daughter or your son, or maybe your partner, whether he or she is wherever they are, maybe they're ill, maybe they're not, but the idea of comforting them in this space and speaking of something more and something wonderful, that hope that brings, and that quiet joy that's running through it all. And so that's what I really wanted to explore in this piece, and not let it become just a Christmas song, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
And so that's where it came from. And it from there, the music came quickly. What took more time was then coming back to the orchestration to work out some different elements, but that was more technical. That wasn't really about part of the construction or part of the thought process. And it was just really exciting to have that along the way when it was just us rehearsing with the choir and the piano, just talking through it, and they got it. I mean, the choir, they latched onto it. They had ideas about it. They were asking me questions about it, but they already had their own answers. And I said, that's exactly what this piece should be, personalized to you as you're performing it, as that person sitting down, listening to you. Um, you know, Administer, I don't know, give hope to you, sing to you. I wanted it to be that give and take sort of relationship. I wanted to be the, are you singing to me, or am I thinking of this in my mind and I'm actually thinking of someone else that I'm humming this to or singing this to? So that's what Hush became for me, that sort of opportunity to build that relationship between the audience and the performers, the musicians, all of them, the singers, the players, and just have this little conversation and allow them each to exist in their own spaces, but with the same idea of getting across that quiet joy, that hope, that peace, that comfort, which is part of the season. And so I was so blessed and so excited to be part of that project. It came out of nowhere, and it was wonderful, truly.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's about all of our questions. So thank you so much for joining me, Valencio. And to everybody else, check our social media page for any updates on Siren Songs and stay tuned.